Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
And this is Ellen ringing in the new year from the tropical island of St. Bart's, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Coming to you again from Nashville, Tennessee, this is Dennis, and if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers
And Sister.
That's right, Ellen. Welcome, everyone, to episode 459. And today we have a guest, and that guest is Jeff Nellis. Dennis, why don't you tell us something about Jeff?
Sure thing. Jeff is a theatrically trained lighting designer currently working in the corporate and events sector of our industry. After his undergraduate years at UC Davis, his theater career evolved from off-Broadway electrician to Broadway assistant to off-Broadway and regional theater LD. He even has one Broadway design credit along the way, the show Primate, back in 2004. Off-Broadway credits include the Outer Critics Circle nomination for Tryst at the Promenade. His many regional theater credits include the Alley Theater, Actors Theater of Louisville, the Cleveland Playhouse, Hartford Stage, Williamstown Theatre Festival, Los Angeles Opera, and many, many others. Corporate projects worked their way into Jeff's schedule relatively early. Jeff has designed projects for numerous corporate clients, including NVIDIA, Deloitte, PepsiCo, CVS, Harley-Davidson, Mazda, Canon, Nikon, Verizon, Amazon, Delta, Berkshire Hathaway, and many, many others. Jeff is a partner in the lighting firm UVLD, a group of 15 lighting designers specializing primarily in high-end corporate event lighting. He also has an Emmy nomination for his work on the 2021 Super Bowl halftime show starring The Weeknd. Jeff, welcome to Light Talk.
Well, thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
How's life going for you? Where are you right now?
I'm in my apartment in Brooklyn and just got back here from Las Vegas yesterday, where I was doing, of all things, a corporate event.
So you have a day off before you get going again?
I do actually, I go back to Las Vegas on Saturday, so it's a lot of
Oh,
Vegas in the life of an events person. That
Is
is a
this you were working in the Sphere, I think you said? Is that what you're doing?
that's not what I'm doing now, but I have worked in the Sphere. I did a big project there. Actually, our group had a very sizable project in the Sphere with a lot of other surrounding space for events as well at the end of 24.
did
Well,
you use that huge video screen?
Sure did. Yep, that is the
Wow.
name of the game in the Sphere. Yeah,
Yep.
actually, I mean, I'd be happy to talk about the project. It was obviously media is the name of the game when you're inside the Sphere, and that's what they focus on for the event. But we also incorporated a lot of virtual lighting into the media plan, which was the whole thing unto itself on that project. Super, super interesting.
That's interesting. We talked a little about virtual lighting the other day on
Hmm.
a couple of different projects. The Tonys used a lot of it.
Right.
Um, and
Rockin' New Year's
it's
Eve, they had
interesting.
all sorts
Yeah,
of
right.
Yeah.
virtual lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was really, really interesting. I mean, we had a headliner in there. They had Gwen Stefani on the event, and both the LDs for that and our team who were doing the corporate meeting part of it. It was our media team designed, for our show, a couple hundred fixtures. I think for the headliners, thousands of fixtures that were designed directly into the media plane, programmed right through an MA3 system, and you can take a single media landscape. And I think part of the rationale is that it's incredibly expensive to produce media for the Sphere, right? So this concept of doing, three scenic designs that are all virtual, and then piling a lot of virtual lighting into it that you can color it and texture it and do highlights and animations and dynamics and all kinds of stuff literally right off the lighting console. So super interesting idea, super fun to execute. Like, yeah, really, really cool project.
Well, there's like basically nowhere to put real lighting in there anyway. So,
Totally. I mean, honestly, when I was first approached about the project, I was like, yeah, I would love to work at the Sphere and light the stage. That's kind of like, where my head was right out of the gate because yeah, totally great venue to work in, a marquee venue for sure. But yeah, no, yeah, there's not a lot of, well, I mean, there is. If you some of the headliner stuff that goes in there, the LED in the Sphere is all blow through, which means you can see right through it if you come up and look at it. So like when the Eagles were in there, They did an elaborate rig where they put a ton of lighting behind the media plane that blew through. I
Right.
think it was a lot of JDCs or something like that. So, there's a lot of opportunities for interesting stuff in there. But, for a corporate event, which is essentially a keynote address and some panel, it's a lot
Yeah.
about executive speaking and things like that.
Right.
Obviously, you're not going to go for effects like that.
Let me ask you this, so our listeners understand what you're saying. You're not actually hanging, let's say, Varilights or something. You're using virtual lights that you're putting into the graphic, and those lights aren't visual camera candy. They're actually outputting the light that's illuminating the talent and the presenters.
Not exactly. So imagine this. Imagine you're on a video game development team, and somebody on that team is developing an environment, right? A place, an outdoor place, a castle, whatever. And there's a whole team of people who are lighting that environment using virtual lighting. And that end product is what you're seeing in the video game, right? And there's some of those things have incredible lighting, right? You look at it and you're like, wow, it's incredible lighting. There's people who just make a whole career out of that. That is essentially what we were doing. So imagine you have a physical stage, it's real. You have a presenter standing on that stage, but behind them, on the media plane of the sphere, you have a massive piece of scenery that is existing only in virtual space. And we are using a couple of hundred virtual lighting fixtures that are also existing only in virtual space to light that piece of virtual scenery. And we can do dynamic lighting for transitional moments and things like that. Or if the graphic looks change and we want to change from a blue look to a green look, we're doing all of that with virtual lights.
But you're lighting the people, the presenters, the talent with actual real lighting
Correct.
fixtures.
Correct.
Okay.
That part, yeah. Same console, same programmer, same output, everything. But yes, the actual presenters are standing there in the flesh, being lit in the flesh lights.
Right. It's like when U2 was there and sort of paved the way for that space. They had some like light poles right on their circular stage. Well, they had that
Yes.
turntable round stage on a square stage, and on the corners there were poles of some sort. Also, at one point, there's like a garage door behind where the stage is that opened, and they had
Hmm.
some truss that came out from there at one point.
Sure.
It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. So, does the size of that screen require a huge budget?
Yes. I think only the most high-end clients are going in there. It's incredibly expensive. I think the daily rental on that place is seven figures and up. Actually, they have a half-size facility in Pasadena, I think. That's a
Yeah.
50% scale size of the sphere, and it's where all the pre-vising happens, which is usually just video folks. But because we were doing all this virtual lighting, we went out to the previs facility in California for a week to virtually light the virtual scenery with the video team, so that because I think we only had 3 days in the actual venue because the cost of being in there is so absolutely prohibitive.
Right.
So we could hit the ground running with with everything all pre-lit.
And as an aside, they say they're losing money.
It does not surprise me. I mean, yeah, it does not surprise me. I mean, the places. I mean, if you've ever been to the Sphere, I mean, I encourage everybody to go there if you have it. It's definitely a one of a kind facility. But I think I went. When they first opened, I went. They have a show in there called Postcards
Right. Right.
from Earth, and I went to see it with the notion that, hey, maybe I'll be in here someday. I should check this place out. And my first thought when I went in there was, man, if you put a stage down there and put a person on it, that person would be a mere rumor in this facility. Like it is so vast that I'm not 100% sure it's going to go the distance as for corporate events and that kind of stuff. It's very impersonal. It's an incredibly impersonal venue.
Let me ask a question about this. Is this half-size sphere also a commercial venue?
It's a great question. I thought it would be until we got there. And no, it is not. It is as my programmer Thomas on that project said to me when we went to the half size venue. He said this place looks like somebody said we need a half size sphere where people can previs show, and there's no budget to build it, but we need it in 5 minutes. And that is what the whole building looks like. It looks like the video plane itself is pristine and 50% size. Everything, the rest of the facility looks like it was slapped together with tin cans and popsicle sticks.
Chuck in a truck.
That kind of, yeah.
And what city? I'm sorry, what city is that in
I think
again?
I believe it's in Pasadena.
Okay.
So, do you use a lot of IMAG on the speakers?
Yes. I mean, very rarely do we do corporate shows where we don't use IMAG, image
Right.
magnification, for those who don't know the term. It's basically, yeah, it's putting a, so in the sphere, you would put a PIP, picture in picture
Right.
windows in the media plane, and you would have camera shots of the
Right.
presenters in those windows. Yeah.
You know, not to keep harping on you two, but I think they did a great job in there and they used a lot of IMAG and you really felt like they were singing right to you. I mean, it felt more personal than the big stadium shows I've seen them do, like at Met Stadium or where there's 84,000 people. It felt, in spite of the size of it and the huge height in there, it's more intimate depth wise. You're closer to the stage, I think, than you might be at, Yankee Stadium. And I thought their IMAG was very effective. So I'm sure you do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a must in there. It's just a must because the venue is just so incredibly large. That if you're going to bring either whether it's a singer or a performer or a presenter, anybody to the audience, I think you gotta go that route. Yeah.
So Gwen Stefani at Sphere is a long cry from like the Alley Theater. How did you transition from one to the other?
Take
Ah,
it back even further.
take it back.
Where
Take it
did
back.
the young Jeff go
Okay,
to
so
school?
such a great question. So everything started at Berkeley High School in California, where I went to high school. And, everything you might imagine a young impressionable kid doing at Berkeley High School, I was doing. So one day my counselor said, "Are you going to thinking about going to college? You need some extracurriculars." And a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, come do light crew." So, as so many of us have a similar story. However, Berkeley High School was unique in that we had a theater on our high school campus called the Berkeley Community Theater, which was also a concert touring venue. So while I was in high school, the theater on our high school campus would do concerts for the Grateful Dead and Santana and Huey Lewis and the likes. So a lot of the people who worked in that theater and the staff bled over into our drama department. So we had exposure to some pretty professional people in the drama department. So there was that aspect of it. So I had, a little bit more exposure to sort of some legitimate things. Don't want to speak disparagingly of high school programs, but I'm sure it's all over the map and, not necessarily to that level. Um, but I can pinpoint the exact moment when I became fascinated with lighting, which was we were doing a production of South Pacific, and one of the faculty teachers was the lighting designer, and there was a scene in a hut where the young sailor falls in love with the local Polynesian girl, and it was lit with two Lecos coming in at 45-degree angles, and one had like a very saturated aquamarine color in it, and the other was like a dark salmon and coming from two opposing angles and then mixing together. And I was blown away by what these two pieces of light did when they met each other, which was to leave the shadows saturated in color and to mix the overlaps in white. And it was this romantic scene and this romantic song. And it was two lights and it was mind blowing to me. Um, and I was like, that's what I want to be doing. Whatever I don't know what that is, but that's what I want to be doing.
And
And
this was freshman high school or
this would have
sophomore?
been uh, this would have been my junior year in high school, I believe. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. So I decided I wanted to do that. However, I was not a very buttoned up student in high school, and I'm being generous on myself by saying it that way. So I decided I was going to go to theater programs. So I applied to all the University of California theater programs because my dad said we had to go to UC State schools one way or the other because they were cheap and good. And somehow, because I guess I wasn't very smart, I didn't really pay much attention to the fact that I didn't even meet the qualifications for admission to these programs because I didn't have 2 years of a foreign language. So I sent out all these applications, and of course, I got all these letterbacks. I'm sorry, Mr. Nellis. Maybe next time, maybe next time. And I only had one left that I hadn't received, and it was from UC Davis. But for some reason, when I sent my application to UC Davis, I had this notion for 5 minutes that I was going to be a fantasy writer. So instead of checking the theater program, I checked the medieval studies box. And I get a letter from UC Davis that says, "Dear Mr. Nellis, while you do not meet even the most basic requirements for admission, you have applied to a severely under-enrolled major. So we are going to admit you provisionally to the medieval studies program." So my dad's like, "You're going to UC Davis, so went to school, sight unseen, never even toured the campus."
Did you even
Um,
know who Chaucer was?
no, I had no idea what I was doing. No, I had not a clue. And I
Had
did
you
wind
been
up
to a
taking.
Renaissance fair?
I had been to a Renaissance fair in Marin
Well,
County.
that's
Yes,
good.
I had done that. Yeah. So I went to UC Davis, and I very quickly changed my major to the theater program. And then for all the students who might be listening to this, I did get serious about academics at that point. I did graduate with honors. I became quite serious about my undertakings after I was able to actually, um, you have the opportunities that the program offered me once I got started. But it was a very, it wasn't a super professional training ground. We didn't have drafting class, for example. There's a lot of things I didn't learn at UC Davis. Like they didn't, we got to design. Everybody got to design because it was kind of a free flow. You want to design a show? No problem, design a show. Um, but it was very loose. There was only one undergraduate lighting class. There was one graduate lighting class. Like it was not. It's nothing I would describe as a lighting program, but it's where lit my first shows.
So at 21 or 22, you graduate and you say, I think I'm going to Broadway.
Not even. I never even meant to leave California. So we had a acting teacher at Davis who was a apprentice acting coach at Williamstown Theatre Festival in Massachusetts in the summers, and I had never heard of this place. And she was encouraging the undergrads at Davis, to check out Williamstown. You should check it out. Go to Williamstown. So I applied, and I got accepted, and I went there as an intern. And the first show that they did my summer year, my first summer, the first year there was a remount of the 1776 that won the Tony Award some years earlier, designed scenery and lighting by Joe Malziner. Um, Peter Hunt was the artistic director at the time, and Peter Hunt, in addition to being a director and artistic director, was a lighting designer by background. And in those days, and also when I joined United Scenic Artists, your stamp number was your sequential number of entry into your discipline. So my stamp number when I was admitted to United Scenic Artists was 646. So that was how many people had been admitted as lighting designers before me. Peter Hunt's stamp number was 4. So we had the artistic director of Williamstown had the USA lighting design stamp number of 4.
What year
And
was this?
this was 1991.
Oh, okay.
So he was remounting as director and sort of de facto lighting person, whatever, this Broadway production. Terrence Mann was in it. Jane Krakowski was in it. And to say I was blown away would be, I can't even begin to, state, I was blown away by what I was seeing people do with light and, the caliber of the actors and stuff coming out of a small, a state school outside of Sacramento in California. So that was just
Was
sheer
Peter lighting it
luck.
or someone else?
Well,
Someone else lit it.
so that's a good question. So the lighting supervisor at that time was a guy named Rui Rita, who's
Yep.
been floating around the industry for years.
Yep.
Rui was very young at the time. I think he was 22. He was the lighting supervisor, and he and Peter were sort of, though Peter was directing it, it was a reproduction of the Joe Malziner lighting design.
Okay.
So Rui was doing most of the execution of that, and Peter, who would chain smoke unfiltered Camel cigarettes at the time in the theater, would sit on the edge of the tech table with his ashtray and his cigarettes and yell at Rui and yell at the actors and stuff like that. I don't know if Peter was a
Yeah,
character to say the
I was
least.
at Williamstown from 79 to 82.
Wow. Okay.
Not doing lighting. I was the publicity director there, but
Oh wow.
he screamed a lot then too.
He was a screamer. He was a screamer for sure.
Although he wasn't the
Uh,
artistic director yet. That was still the Nikos
okay.
Sakharopoulos
Yep. Yeah.
era. But
hmm I mean, Nikos was heavily talked about when I was there, but I did not overlap with Nikos
yeah.
at all. So it was after.
And you
But
survived
mhm.
the 18-hour-a-day internship?
So that's a really interesting thing to ask about because I thought it was fun because I didn't know what an incredible OSHA violation the whole thing was. You know what I mean? Like I just, we would work overnight, and I don't smoke now. I haven't in my entire adult life pretty much, but I smoked then, and we would like, do our overnight changeovers in the catwalk, and we'd smoke in the catwalks, and and our assistant ME would walk into the theater, and stand on the stage every hour and shout up at the catwalks, attitude check, and everybody would shout back, "Fuck you!" Sorry, you'll have to probably edit that out. And it was funny, and it was good for morale, and we had a good time, and I remember being bonded, and I remember, years later, I did 10 seasons ultimately at Williamstown. It really was my training ground.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's where I
As a
learned how to be a lighting
designer, or
designer.
as the
Eventually, ultimately, yes.
A number of people that we've interviewed who went to Williamstown have said that's where I got my MFA.
right?
Same here. I mean, in fact, I would go as far as to say, uh, I all of my years there were while Rui was the lighting supervisor, and when Rui eventually left that position, it was because of it was a couple of artistic directors later that came in and had his own person and stuff like that. And I was so blown away by the resumes collectively of the interns who had gone to New York and gone into the industry while Rui was the lighting supervisor, that I wrote a letter to Lighting Dimensions magazine, and I said, I just have to say all this stuff out loud. There's, you look at this body of people, 50, 60, 70 people who were lighting interns during his tenure there, and there's like 9 Broadway design credits. There's, 200 as Broadway assistant credits. There's, just in this body of people who were interns. These are people who were interns at Williamstown. I'm not giving all of that credit to Rui,
Right.
but it was an
So
incredible
he
training
had a
ground.
great reputation there. Did we publish your letter in Lighting Dimensions?
Yes, you did publish my letter. You edited it down significantly, but you did publish it in
Oh,
the
that's
letter
good.
in the letters.
Phew.
Yes, yeah. No, I was thrilled when you guys published it. Actually, so very, very thrilled.
That's
Actually,
great.
um, but there was one other really interesting thing that was going on at Williamstown at that time, which was that we had, at the time, Rui had a right-hand guy there who was sort of the associate, who was a guy named Ben Piercy, who is a fascinating career unto himself. I don't know if you know Ben, but he
Yeah,
now
he's
works.
59 Productions and
He
does
is
all
50.
that cool
That's
video
right.
stuff now.
That's right. But Ben at that time was one of the assistant lighting supervisors there. Ben also worked for
Oh,
James Turrell for a number of years, if you know the light artist
yeah,
James Turrell.
sure.
And Ben made, for 8 or 9 years or something, made a career out of technically executing James's designs as a light artist. And Ben has an incredibly interesting career.
Doesn't he also, or did, share an office with Ken Billington?
Yes, he worked with Ken for many, many years. Actually, Ken plucked him out of Williamstown. Actually, so this is kind of the story I was going to tell, which is that Ben brought a program to Williamstown in the early 90s called MiniCAD, and we were drafting on all of us had learned on pencils, and Ben started promoting that we use this program called MiniCAD. So we're drawing our light plots on MiniCAD and taping pieces of paper together to do light plots like a bunch of idiots because we didn't have plotters and all this kind of stuff. And Ken came and did a show, and Ben, who was like sort of the staff assistant designer on the main stage, worked with Ken, and Ken said, "Come to New York, I need you." So that started a many, many, many decades long relationship. And one of the first things that Ben did when he got to New York with Ken was just convert their studio to computer drafting from pencil drafting. And I moved to New York maybe a year later, and they called me almost immediately and said, we're looking for people who can draw on MiniCAD. And there was not that many of us at the time, but I had learned it at Williamstown. So I went over there. We were drawing amusement park rides for SeaWorld and all kinds of stuff in MiniCAD. And it's how I got into Broadway, because one day Paul Gallo's office called and said, "We want to switch to CAD. Do you guys have any spare people?" And they were like, "You gotta go work for Paul." And I was terrified to go work for Paul because, boy, did he have a reputation. Jeez. In fact, I had always said to myself, I really want to work on a Broadway show, and I'll do it no matter who calls. Unless Paul Gallo calls, and I'm not doing it because I've heard he's really mean. Um, and uh, and of course, he was the one who called. That's because that's how the world works. But I went, of course, I said yes. So I went over there, and we worked with David Weiner, was with him at the time, and Philip Rosenberg, who became, as in my mind, as a legend in his own right, and kind of was the mayor of Broadway for a while, in my opinion. Um, and we started doing MiniCAD in his office. Now, for your listeners, I don't know if you know this, but MiniCAD has now changed its name. It's now called Vectorworks, and it's a complete industry standard. So we started using that program there, and then Paul brought me into the theater. That's how I started working in Broadway theaters. As I started assisting Broadway shows with Paul.
So you're doing assistant work and associate work on Broadway, and in 2004 you get your first Broadway show, Primate,
Yes,
which
you're right.
nobody knows anything about.
No,
The
no,
show
no.
opens and 2 or 3 days later it closes. What
Correct.
what does what does Jeff Nellis think with his first Broadway show closing like days after it opens?
Right, right. Well, I think that one of the great untold stories then and now of commercial theater in New York, off Broadway and Broadway, is
Before
flops.
you tell the
Yeah,
story, just
yeah.
briefly tell the pedigree of the show. This was a show that had a great cast and a great director and
Oh,
producer. It
yeah,
had a
yeah.
pedigree.
Yeah, it had huge pedigree. So the show was found at Florida State University, and and Chase Mishkin, who at the time was a very high power Broadway producer, um, had partnered with Leonard Soloway, also a high powered Broadway producer at the time, and they found this show in Florida State. And they decided they wanted to bring it to Broadway immediately. And they had, I don't know if they must have cast, of course, they cast it for Broadway because these guys couldn't have been in it at Florida State, but it was, Andre DeShields was in it and James Naughton was in it. And the actress from Children of a Lesser God, who you
Phyllis Freilich.
thank you, was in it, who I think won an Oscar or something for. She was in the stage version, I think, of that, which I think was she had a Tony Award for or something like that. I'm not sure. I might have my facts wrong there, but yeah, no, it was a powerhouse cast. But the show itself, not so great. But I was doing a production of in the basement theater at the time of the West Side Arts for a director named Joe Brancato, who, by the way, I met designing a show at Williamstown, my first year being offered a second stage design at Williamstown, which was basically like new works, we'll give it to the main stage assistants, will design in this space. And I was given a show, and the director was a guy named Joe Brancato, who started hiring me for this and that in New York. I'm doing a small basement off Broadway theater with Joe, and Chase Mishkin and Leonard Soloway were producing the show we were working on. And one day I'm sitting there at the tech table, and Leonard Soloway walks in and he says to me, "Jeff, good morning. Do you want to light a Broadway show?" And I said, "I do. Yes, yes, I do."
Now, you had already
And
taken your USA exam and all
oh
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had taken my USA exam. Yes, I had worked many union contracts by this time. So they couldn't find anybody. They wanted to get it in before the before the Tony deadline. They wanted to mount this thing. They wanted an opening date, something like 2.5 months after they decided to bring it in. They had to find a theater. They had to cast it and everything. The timetable was insane, and they went down the entire list of the 6 people who designed all Broadway shows at the time for lighting or whatever it was, and nobody was available, and I just happened to be sitting in the room. So they had me the Broadway show. Uh, so I mean, in terms of the flop, I mean, I worked. So I mean, there's so many flop stories in New York. It's hard to even you could never even count them all. But like one framework for that is we were at the Longacre Theater, which that calendar year had 2 shows in it the entire year. One was Primate that ran for 3 days. The other was a show called The Oldest Living Confederate Widow Tells All, which ran 2 days less than Primate. And
Oh dear.
I had the privilege of remounting Oldest Living Confederate Widow Tells All for Ken Posner because he was busy lighting Wicked at the time. So I sat at the tech table for both of those shows in the entirety of the calendar year for the Longacre Theater, and between the two of them, they ran for 4 days. So I would say that like flops, and or to put, yeah, I mean, and also I had done some commercial off Broadway stuff a lot. I kind of worked exclusively on flops actually for a hot second there, um,
A
and Ken,
flop indicator. Be careful.
yeah, yeah, be careful. Like that, maybe that's why I got run out of town. I don't know. But even when I was at Ken Billington's office, he had his office space. He had over 100 Broadway posters on his walls that were all flops, and it was always jokingly called the Wall of Flops. Because you never heard of any of these shows. There was just a
Right.
100 show posters of Broadway shows that no one had ever heard of, which I think is one of the untold stories of Broadway. Right? Nobody knows about all the shows that never make it. There's so many
Right.
shows that never make it every year.
There's your book, Jeff. There's your book.
Right. Aren't they all on the walls of Joe Allen's or
Yeah, probably. Yeah, right.
um
So,
it's a good thing Ken Posner didn't skip Wicked for the other one.
well, no, he did. The funny thing, there is a funny story about that show though, which is it was one act. It was Ellen Burstyn, and very famous performer, and she they got very bad reviews in the New York Times, and she just said, I'm not going on. But during the preview process, we had the whole show was lit with a follow spot, and Wendell Harrington did the projection, so it was all projection all over the set, and it was not a terribly complex lighting show because it was a very complex projection show. And But every night after the intermission, the follow spot would drift and do things, and which is a problem in a one person show, on Broadway, like, so I'm asking the house lead, I'm like, what's going on up there, like, what's up with the follow spot? Oh, and he's fine, he's fine, like this went on for like 2 nights. And then I had to split because I had another project, and Ken hopped over because I guess however the timing worked out. And he watched the show one night. He fired the guy, like, which I was too young to know how to do
Oh,
at the
that's
time. I
funny.
was like, Ken just walked in, and he was, and it turned out the guy was falling asleep. He could not keep his eyes open in the second half of the show.
You
Uh,
needed the Doug Fleener DMX controlled follow spot operator dog collar.
right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I love hearing these stories of flops and everything, but I want to move on to UVLD. I mean,
Sure.
you left Broadway, you're disenchanted. You say, I don't want any more flops. I'm going into sell cork flooring and cars. What's the deal with UVLD and
Well,
industrials in the corporate
sure.
world?
Yes. So, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I'm slightly joking about the flops. I mean, I worked on Riverdance, and I worked on a bunch of other things as an assistant. And one day I decided I didn't want to be an assistant anymore for a variety of reasons. And I got a phone call from Peter Kazarowski out of the blue, and he said, um, I have a show that's out of towning, and I need an associate. And it's going to come to New York, and it's called The Producers, and it's with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. And do you want to do it? Though I just heard through the grapevine you're not assisting anymore. And I turned it down because I had decided I wasn't assisting anymore, which is the best move I ever made because I'd still be doing that show to this day. Not really, but kind of, right? Um, so I started meeting people on Broadway who were doing corporate events, and had some asks and some offers. Hey, come work on this thing. Hey, come do this thing. And so I don't think anybody wakes up and says, I want to do corporate events when I grow up. I don't think that's a thing. I think what happens is somewhere in your journey, you get exposed to it. Um, and it's an intriguing arena to work in. The people are very different than the theater community. They're very different, I think, than to some degree, I would say, than the television community, though I haven't done a ton of television, but the a bit I have done. So it's not a hard thing to fall into when it falls onto your plate and it falls onto your lap. So I started being asked, I was given opportunities, right, to do corporate stuff. So people started asking me to do corporate stuff. And the early opportunities I had were involved programming consoles and things like that. I remember somebody calling me up one day and saying, hey, there's a AstraZeneca, which is a pharmaceutical company event in Detroit. You can program a moving light console, right? Can you go there and do this thing? Well, I absolutely could not program a moving light console. But I said yes. And I went and did this thing, and sweated a lot through my way through the console, but kind of got nudged my foot into the door. And I did a lot. I did corporate events for quite a number of years before I joined UVLD. But I met a lot of those guys early on. At that time, I think there was only 4 or 5 people in the group. They still called themselves Ingram and Associates at that time. They hadn't changed the name. John Ingram being the founding member of the group. Um, and then I started freelancing for them along the way. I think some of my first big stuff, Greg Norgio, who's one of the greatest humans of all time, who's a member of UVLD, probably, I think, pardon me, Greg, but the oldest member of UVLD. He did Avon conventions for years and years and years, and those shows always had lots of rooms. So they always needed lots of rooms with big lighting rigs and things like that. So there was always a need for a lot of LDs, a lot of programmers to cover all these events. So I would come in as a freelancer. And then I just did one year, I realized I was doing a lot of work for them. And I had a lot of my own clients at the time too, but of course that had nothing to do with the group. That was just my own work. And it was Christmas Eve. one year, and I'm driving back from the mall, and my phone rings, and it's John Ingram and Greg Cohen, who were sort of the heart and soul of UVLD, and they're like, "We want you to join UVLD." And I was thrilled because I love these guys. Like they're some of the greatest people I had worked with and met in the industry. They were just real. John years ago lit the Rock Center tree lighting, and Greg is a character beyond description, and just both of them incredibly talented. And they were doing really really big shows for really really big clients, and I was absolutely thrilled that they wanted me to join the group. It was such an enormous compliment. So I thought about it for a little bit because it was a big change, and then I said yes.
And what year was that?
I want to say it was maybe 10 years ago. I'm
Cool.
guessing a little bit, but yeah.
For our audience who might be unaware, because a week ago I was unaware, UVLD stands for Unlimited Visibility Lighting Design.
Yes.
And it has the best catchphrase slogan that I think any company could possibly have. The slogan is the company is dramatic design without the drama.
Huh.
Yes, that
And
is true. And yes.
Very clever.
how did that come about? That's just a
Well,
wonderful slogan.
well, I think first of all, I'm sure it's a brainchild of Greg Cohen, because if you spend 5 minutes in life talking to Greg, if you ever have the opportunity, that is right out of his comic sensibilities. Um, I think, and it is meant to have some humor to it. However, I think in the world of corporate events and corporate work, lighting is expected to make a large impact, and most of the time they don't are the people executing the show, vis-a-vis the creative directors, the producers, the clients. They're not looking to spend a lot of time working with the lighting team. They're looking for the lighting to happen in the background, and to be spectacular and to be all this stuff. But we don't. It's in our world, in my world, it's a rare show where we spend a lot of time all collectively together on headset going, we're going to work on this lighting moment now. For the most part, you make your bread and butter by delivering the goods, having a high impact show, lighting for cameras successfully, all the things, and being, as Greg would say, no drama. So that is, I think, a huge part of what we do.
I think for our audience who are unaware of what corporate industrial design is, you should go to the website and take a look at some of the photographs of the work that Jeff and his colleagues do, because we're talking big shows here, and it's pretty incredible work. Jeff, can you explain some of the differences between the theater design process and the corporate design? Like, who are the players on your team? How do they all fit together? How does the process go from beginning to end?
Sure. I think, I mean, I'll definitely walk through that. One thing I would say about corporate jobs is they're very, there's a very large variety within the corporate world, right? We do big product reveals, we do sales meetings, we do broadcast things, we do, there's so many different types of projects. And there's such a vast skill set, I think, that people have to bring to bear to be a lighting designer in the corporate sphere, right? We light for cameras and broadcast every day. Every project has some aspect of cameras. Every has some aspect of broadcast. Almost every project. So you have to know how to do that. And but people are very concerned with the light. It's not a TV show, right? It's a live event. So you're definitely merging these two things into one sensibility. In terms of process, I mean, a lot of it kind of a not untypical process might be, sometimes they just hand you a rendering. Sometimes you're coming to the project at a certain point in time, and some large idea has been sold to a client, and you're handed a rendering, and they say, do this. And so that happens sometimes. And and then in that case, you put together a light plot based on some of it's not unlike being handed a set design by a set designer who's been in collaboration with the director, right? It's kind of a similar idea. Other times, as in the theater, you might be in the room for the first conversations, right? Sometimes they want a lighting forward design, and you might be present in that process from the very beginning. That's actually happening more and more in my world at this point in my career. But the players would be, a lot of, so we work for what we call agencies. Agencies are companies that are hired by our end clients, right? So if you're doing a show for, let's say, PepsiCo, PepsiCo hires an agency to produce their show. That agency is going to bring on board creative director, producer. They're going to hire a production team, a bunch of AV partners, a bunch of equipment partners, lighting designers, all the things. And so the creative process usually happens, the creative director will usually be quite involved in, the approach for the show. And all of the shows are very different because all of these corporate clients that we work for have very different cultures. Some of them are very rah rah, we want to rally, we want excitement, we want lots of flashing lights, we want lots of, marching bands in the house. Others are really simple, clean, even if they're in an arena, they want a one look kind of concept, very crisp, no haze, things like that. So they're all over the map, and it's our job to understand those clients. It's our job to understand the aesthetic that they want. And it's our job, to segue into the next possible question, it's our job to tell their story, right? Like whatever it is um, that they're trying to bring to bear, which is I think corporate, um, and I think that theatrical training actually is super handy for that because you can't succeed as a theatrical lighting designer if you don't understand what story you're trying to tell, right? Like I think as a theatrical designer or any designer, you're tasked with telling a story. And if you're not focused on telling that story, right, you're not going to succeed. And that same reality is true in the corporate sector, which is that you have to understand the story, or as they say in that industry, the messaging that client is trying to say. A lot of time, it's a question of branding, and we respect their brands. You don't mess with their brands, all kinds of stuff like that.
In terms of calling the show, is it like a show caller instead of a stage manager in the corporate events?
Yeah. So actually, interesting question because a lot of the show callers in the corporate world actually come from theater. We have a bunch that work regularly who come from Radio City. Actually, there's a cultural crossover between the people who work on a lot of the Christmas shows and stuff have kind of infused into the corporate world. But yeah, it's very common. A lot of the show callers in the corporate world come from the Broadway world and things like that. That's pretty standard. But now they're adding graphics and screen switching to their call sheet.
Hmm.
I have a specific technical question, if you could, Jeff. You were talking about you're using lighting design to tell the story in the corporate show, and you mentioned corporate branding. I assume by that you're also talking about the logos and the colors of the branding. I remember, and our company does a lot of designing for NBC, and as you know, NBC has this thing called a peacock. And every time we've done gobos or logos or projections or anything color-based, getting the colors to exactly match the tail of that peacock is a really big thing for NBC.
I'm
So do
sure.
you have problems technically with a
Oh,
lot of the
yes.
fixtures and the instrumentation and the LEDs when the corporate branding colors are so specific?
Yes, absolutely. And we add a second layer on, which is that when we are using color to chase branding, we have to have it look spot on to the live audience, and we have to have it look spot on the broadcast. Um, which means sometimes we're in the trenches with the video team quite often and dealing with color temperature and all kinds of things and screens and LED screens and all kinds of stuff. Because it's again part of that hybrid version of the industry, which is that like everything has to be correct for the live show and everything has to be correct for the broadcast show. So yeah, I mean, I feel right now that I have one particular client that is one of my larger clients that is very, very focused on CRI, uh, values in fixtures, and part of it is that low CRI fixtures, they don't like the way low CRI fixtures look to the naked eye, to the eye, to the live of their CEO, basically. And is very challenging with the deluge of LED fixtures that are on the market right now because we primarily key light for most of these events with framing profile fixtures. And the arc fixtures have much higher native CRI. So I
Yeah.
find myself chasing around arc lights trying to make this particular client satisfied, which we do. But you go to the rental companies and things like that, and they're like, which one of these five framing LED profiles do you want? And you're like, actually, none of them. I want an arc light, that has the CRI we're looking for. So absolutely. I mean, color is a huge challenge all the time. It's something that it's a huge part of your skill set that you're constantly learning, constantly, shaping the new tools that are, I mean, and we're living in the golden age of lighting, right? Like the new tools that come on the market and the LED stuff is nonstop. Like it's hard to even keep up
Yeah.
with how many products are on the market. But learning which ones are best suited to all these tools and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes. Unquestionably, it's a
Sadly,
challenge.
going back to your initial conversation we had, you're also trying to match the lighting fixtures with the color rendering index of the video walls that are
Correct.
behind the fixtures, which sometimes could be natively 8,000, 9,000 degrees Kelvin.
Yes. I mean, to put a sharp point on that, I have a client who requires 6,500 Kelvin on their LED screen because of their graphics team requires this. They do all their graphic work in that color temperature, and they're somewhat intolerant. But they also require their presenter to be lit below 5,000 Kelvin. Um, and there's an LED, and the LED screen is directly behind the presenter, which is very common now in these events.
Yeah.
So these are absolutely challenges. They're definitely solvable. I mean, there's, it's just one more thing you learn over time, and like everything else, you learn it by going through a couple meat grinders, and then you get better at it. But yes, I mean, and also in the events world, we've the last number of years of the events world, like people could not get enough putting LED screens behind the presenters for the camera backgrounds and everything like that, which is, to your point, it's very challenging when there's branding all over those screens,
Sure.
and those screens are in the camera background, and then that camera background appears on the image magnification screens in the same venue, and so you're seeing the same graphic content both behind the presenter with your eyeball and also in the camera shot that is put on another screen in the same venue. And the color rendering of that background has to be the same. It has to be the same in the camera shot as it does to your eye. So yeah.
I would love to hear more about this, but the luminoids have arrived and they're getting tuned up to play us off.
There you
One
go.
final question. How does a young, new Jeff Nellis get into this world? I mean, what do you look for in an assistant? What would somebody coming out of school, what skill sets, what training should they have to be able to find work in the corporate world?
I would say, I mean, we don't use assistants in the corporate world the same, but obviously but the path is similar, right? I would say a couple things. I mean, like, uh, don't confuse the tools with the goal, which is to say, learning how to use a moving light console is in our world is a very important skill, especially for an entry level position. But learn how to use it as a designer. Don't just learn how to push the buttons and build effects and do all the things you need to do. And I would say the same thing about drafting. I think I felt this way when the switch to computer drafting was going on, that people would replace the aesthetics of knowing how to do start strong, finish strong with a pencil, which is simply knowing how to use all the feature sets of the drafting program, and suddenly the plots didn't look good. They looked like junk, even if the person knew. So I would say, you know, don't get bogged down in the tools. Always remember what the intent of the project is. So if you speak in that language, I think people will listen to you and they will notice you. Um, be tenacious. Do not give up. Be tenacious. Constant, continuously, no matter how many knocks you take, be tenacious and keep going, um, because others will not. So be the last one standing. How about that? And then the other thing, I would say, is do what it takes to be in the room where the things that you want to be exposed to are happening. So internships, cold call, whatever it takes. You expose yourself to the people that are doing the things that you want to do. It's not going to happen if you don't do that. Like, if you're not in the room, or if you're not finding those people, they're not going to be calling you. Your phone's not going to ring. So find a way to be in the room that you want to be in. be unrelenting, be tenacious, and understand the intention of the projects people are exposing you to. Don't just get bogged down in the tools of the project, I think.
I want to give a shout out to a mutual friend of ours, Chris Hibbard, who works
Great
for
guy.
Creative Technology. And he said, you got to talk to this Jeff Nellis. And one thing you didn't mention that I was told about you, Jeff Nellis is one of the nicest guys working in the corporate
Oh,
world.
He's too nice.
that's
Well,
sweet.
I would say that about Chris Hibbard also.
I think you need to add, also be a nice person.
You know what? I say this all the time, especially in the corporate sphere. Be nice to the PAs, be nice to everybody, because they PAs are tomorrow's producers, and anybody can tank you. But just be nice anyway. Be nice to everybody, and it will help propel your career. Don't let your ego get in the way. Be nice to people, be collaborative with people, listen to people, make people feel heard. And these are important career building tools. These things, in addition to just being a matter of right and wrong, will advance your career. That's true, and that's a fact. And Chris is an amazing guy. So yeah.
That's a great ending right there.
Yeah.
Steve, you want to take us off?
Sure. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tell us, once again, you spend another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, you will have to deal with me, Snoot from the Snoot Group. And don't get it twisted. Just because I married one of these losers does not mean I will go easy on you. So don't with me.
This has been Light Talk with Jeff Nellis as our guest, coming to you from the tropical paradise of St. Bart's, the Lone Star State, the entertainment capital of the world, New York City, and Music City, Nashville, Tennessee.
Be sure to join us next week when we dive into more lighting shenanigans and serve up a fresh, piping hot casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
We'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Lumen